for remaining here for the second day. My name is Augusto Zampina from the Dicastery for promoting inter-human development. And we are delighted that, that you are here with us again. Father Josh from the Dicastery later on will synthesize what we lived or we listened and we experienced and we learned yesterday. And we have a very, very good speakers and panelists for today. But today is a time for discussion, moving towards action. That the action-oriented day will be tomorrow, but we will discuss, we will have more time for discussions and interventions in this session. And just before we start, we are going to put also a video, a short video of the Pope. These short videos that they last only 1 minute, to inspire us also, but in anticipation to what we're going to have before lunch. Before lunch, we are going to meet the Pope, and so in anticipation, we are going to see this video, and then I will hand over to the chair, Rabbi Sinclair, who has very kindly accepted to chair this session. And are we ready for the video? Yeah.
La mayor parte de los habitantes del planeta se declaran creyentes. Esto debería provocar un diálogo entre las religiones. No debemos dejar de orar por él y colaborar con quienes piensan distinto.
Confío en Buda.
Creo en Dios.
Creo en Jesucristo.
Creo en Dios, Alá.
Muchos piensan distinto, sienten distinto, buscan a Dios o encuentran a Dios de diversa manera. En esta multitud, en este abanico de religiones, hay una sola certeza que tenemos para todos. Todos somos hijos de Dios.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Confío en vos para difundir mi petición de este mes. Que el diálogo sincero entre hombres y mujeres de diversas religiones conlleve frutos de paz y justicia. Confío en tu oración.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day. I'd like to thank the Vatican for organizing this wonderful conference, for inviting us to participate, and I'd like to thank the United Nations for setting forth the SDGs and such an ambitious vision for us to meet. This morning's first session is on the subject of partnership. Partnership is in many ways absolutely central, I think, to what this conference can achieve. These goals are only going to be met by all of us bringing our unique skill sets, toolboxes, and capacities together and to work together to recognize what we can each add and how we can each contribute. I find an inspiration for this in the passage from the Pentateuch that Jews are reading this Shabbat. Tomorrow in synagogues we have an annual cycle of readings from the Pentateuch. And tomorrow we are reading from the end of the book of Exodus about the completion of the work of building the sanctuary, which the Jewish people built in the desert as a place for God's presence to rest. And the reading discusses how all of the craftsmen, the gold workers and the bronze workers and the carpenters and the weavers and all of the people bringing their unique talents, gifts and capabilities together under the direction of the vision from Moses communicated by God about how this beautiful and intricate structure was going to be created. Now the commentators see the sanctuary as a microcosm for our world, that just as they were building a place for God's presence to world, so we in macro are building a place, that's our task in the world, is to build a place for God's presence to rest. And the challenge for us too is to take all these people and all their gifts, the NGOs with their ability to raise consciousness and awareness, and the private sector with its ability to mobilize resources in a scale and a speed which few other sectors can match, and the government sector and their ability to, and their necessity to regulate and to legislate and to set incentives, and perhaps above all, the religious movements to provide moral and ethical, spiritual and backing and vision, and the governments and the NGOs and the UN to set an overriding vision. I don't think I want to push the comparison between Moses and the United Nations too far, but at least they have provided a vision and we're grateful. So that, I think, is some of the subjects we might want to discuss. How do we all bring together and synergize the gifts and the talents and the abilities that each of these sectors and stakeholders have to create something bigger than what we all can and to fix our world in order that God's presence should be able to rest here. So, with that, I'd like to begin, and I'd like to warmly call upon Dr. Josiane Nasser of the Focolare movement to offer a spiritual reflection on interreligious dialogue. Dr. Josiane Nasser.
Thank you. It's okay? Yes. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. We have just heard from Pope Francis about the importance of interreligious dialogue, where he highlighted love as the foundation for a true dialogue between the faithful of different religions. This brings me to the experience of Chiara Lubich, founder of the Focolare movement, who passed away in 2008. In fact, at the start of the movement, during the Second World War, she made the powerful and illuminating discovery of God as love. The gospel was rediscovered as words to live, and especially the testament of Jesus, that they may all be one, because became the Magna Carta of the movement as it began. God made Chiara understand the need to live for universal fraternity, to contribute with all the resources that exist in the Church and humanity to bring about unity in the human family. In discovering God as love, Chiara understood the strong bond linking all people because they are children of one Father and therefore brothers and sisters. Not only that, but nature too, created by God, and which St. Francis called sister, could contribute to the fulfillment of God's plan for the whole of humanity. The charism of unity of the movement involves people from various churches, religions, and cultures. It is called to give an injection of love, of fraternity, also in all fields of human knowledge. That is why ecology and the harmony of nature created by God have always been important for the movement. We might ask what contribution we can make as men and women of many cultures and religious traditions to the protection of our planet. In paragraph 94 in Laudato Si, the Pope talks about integral ecology as a key concept that includes the environment, economics, society, culture, and daily life, directing them towards the common good and justice between generations. His words, care for our common home, are particularly meaningful. To echo his words, I would like to read some extracts from a letter Chiara Lubich wrote in 1990 to Nikio Niwano, a Japanese leader of Religions for Peace and founder of the Buddhist movement Risshoku Zeikai. She said, "The earth in which we live is a global village. This reminds us that God, the Creator, entrusted the earth to all. we need to apply all our spiritual resources, all our faith in the love of God. We need a great respect for the life of every created being, and above all, a new universal solidarity between persons and peoples to give the course of events a new direction. Without a new awareness of universal solidarity, there will be no step forward. Only religion can give this new awareness. The Bible teaches us that only in harmony with God's plan can nature and humankind find order and peace. If humankind is not at peace with God, the earth itself is not at peace. Here, I may say, is the core of any kind of sustainable development, because human beings have within themselves the capacity to create a new society. Chiara's letter continues, if we discover that all creation is a gift from a Father who loves us, it will be much easier to find a harmonious relationship with nature. And if we also discover that this gift is for everyone in the human family, more attention and respect will be given to something that belongs to all humankind, both present and future. Furthermore, in May 2005, Chiara wrote a message to participants in a conference bringing together teachers, researchers, and professionals active in the field of environmental sciences. Among other things, she wrote, "We have always seen creation in its marvelous immensity as being one, emerging from the heart of a God who is love. We perceived the presence of God beneath things. So, if the pine trees were gilded by the sun, if the streams ran down in their glistening waterfalls, if the daisies and the other flowers and the sky were festive because of the summer, stronger yet was the vision of a sun that lay beneath all that is created. I believe we saw in a certain way God who sustains, who upholds all things. So it was also for every man and woman, for humanity, the flower of creation. As a result, we felt that each person has been created as a gift for the person next to them, and those next to him or her had been created by God as a gift for them. On earth, all is in relationship of love with all, each thing with each thing." These words made me think of what Pope Francis had said in paragraph 240 of Laudato Si. He says, "The world, created according to the divine model, is a web of relationships. This leads us not only to marvel at the connections existing among creatures, but also to develop a spirituality of that global solidarity which flows from the mystery of the Trinity. All of us are called to engage with and collaborate in fulfilling God's plan for the world." As Chiara Lubich said, if the aim of men and women is not economic interests and selfishness, but love for other people and for nature, through their contribution, the earth will be transfigured until it becomes an earthly paradise. As a Catholic Christian, I feel greatly encouraged by what Pope Francis has said in his message for Lent, which began 2 days ago. The title is, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God." Among other things, the Pope says, creation urgently needs the revelation of the children of God, who have been made a new creation. The Pope indicates how we can concretely live our faith and mentions 3 ways of doing this. Fasting, that is learning to change our attitude towards others and all of creation, turning away from the temptation to devour everything to satisfy our voracity, and being ready to suffer for love, which can fill the emptiness of our hearts. Prayer, which teaches us to abandon idolatry and the self-sufficiency of our ego, and to acknowledge our need of the Lord and His mercy. Almsgiving, whereby we escape from the insanity of hoarding everything for ourselves in the illusory belief that we can secure a future that does not belong to us, and thus to rediscover the joy of God's plan for creation and for each of us, which is to love Him, our brothers and sisters, and the entire world, and to find in this love our true happiness. These are three actions that may be present in different ways in all religions that seek to reach God, the Supreme Being, to reach true happiness. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Josiane Nassau for that beautiful and inspiring reflection. It's a wonderful way to frame our session this morning. And now it's my great pleasure and honor to invite the Reverend Dr. Jostram Isaac Kuithadam, I hope I've got that right.
Fantastic.
Who is coordinator of the Sector of Ecology and Creation at the Vatican Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. He is a philosopher of science and an author of many books on the philosophical roots of the ecological crisis and religious approaches to solving it. It's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Kuithadam.
Thank you. Dear sisters and brothers, a very good morning to you all. I began with the sisters because today is the International Women's Day. So, so we applaud to all our mothers and sisters and Earth itself. As Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, number one is a mother, Mother Earth, Sister Earth. I've been interested with the task of gathering together the main ideas of yesterday. And once a person was visiting an elderly couple, and he was visiting them after a long time. So there was a long conversation with the husband. At one moment, the husband wanted to offer this visitor a cup of coffee. So he wanted to call his wife. He said, "Darling, could you please bring us some coffee?" The coffee came. Then she said, "My love, can you bring us some biscuits as well?" And she went for the biscuits. And the visitor was very impressed. He told the husband, "Wow, wonderful. Even after so many years of marriage, you love each other so much. You call her darling, my love." And in a hushed voice, the husband replied, "It's only that I don't remember her name any longer." Okay. I'm sure it's not the case with you. We do remember what happened yesterday. It's been a very rich, fabulous day. Last night, I was calculating. We had, among moderators and speakers, as many as 25 speakers. And so many stimulating ideas. So I thought we could gather all these wonderful ideas together in terms of 7 takeaway messages that we could carry home with us even after the conference. The first message came from the children, one of urgency. We began the conference with children praying in song. And I'm sure all of us remember their sweet faces, but the most powerful message came from them. They were telling us, do not destroy our home. Do not steal our future. And the urgency came through that. We had a number of interventions, we said, with regard to climate change, the famous planetary boundaries, biodiversity loss, nitrogen cycle, land use change, and also depletion of resources. And by 2030, we require another planet altogether to satisfy our needs. And let me just stress the climate point. It was very well brought out that according to the latest IPCC report, we have as few as 12 years to save our common home. Now, I do not know whether we religious communities and leaders are really aware of the gravity of the situation. Last 10,000, 11,000 years, Earth's average temperature varied hardly 1 degree. And from 1850 up to today, it has changed by more than 1 degree, and we are seeing the impacts. And scientists are telling us if you go beyond 1.5, we are walking towards a very catastrophic situation. I wish my friend Joe from Samoa, one of our young climate warriors, was here. Their islands are sinking, and problems all around the world. So we cannot afford to wait. We have as few as 12 years. And Father Sean McDonough here, he wrote once, if our generation does not act, no other generation can repair the damage we are causing to our common home. So we are living in a very, very critical moment. And the children communicated this message to us. And I was remembering Pope Francis' words. What kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? So the first message came from children. The second message was that we need to place the poor at the center in our journey towards the realization of the SDGs. Now, Jesus was asked once to synthesize the commandments, and he was brilliant. He said, just 2 commandments. Love God, love your neighbor. When we organized this conference, we had a similar dilemma. We are speaking about 17 SDGs, 169 objectives, targets. And so we thought we could concentrate on the 5 pillars, people and planet, peace and prosperity and partnership. But we went even further. If you remember, the subtitle of the conference is Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. And as Pope Francis says, again, Laudato Si' too, Earth itself, abused and maltreated, is really among the poor. And so I think we need to place the poor very much at the center. We heard this invitation of inclusive growth. We should not leave anyone behind. And I hope it won't become a cliche. It won't become a cliche. Because if you really want to be inclusive, if you want to leave no one behind, we have to start with the poor, as Pope Francis teaches us. The migrants, the sick, the poorest, the bonded laborers. And only when we begin with them, place them at the center, can we really have inclusive growth. And I always think of Gandhi who said, when you need to take an important decision, think of the poorest person you have ever met, and your decision will be right. And I hope as we think of actions, we place the poor at the center. The third point was about the challenges to the UN, United Nations, and the religions. I think the UN was challenged. What do we mean by sustainable development? We need to bring in other dimensions like the spiritual, ethical. We need to address the question of inequality. And I thought probably a better word is not some sustainable development, but integral flourishing. Because development is sometimes too economical. Flourishing is all can have the fullness of life. John 10:10, I came so that you may have life, and life in all its fullness. And flourishing not just for humanity, all forms of life can flourish. Also, religions were challenged. Are we part of the problem? Gender equity, equality with our patriarchal structures, are we promoting it or just allowing the status quo to carry on? The caste and class discriminations, are religions challenging this? And I thought the message was very clear. We religions need to rediscover our prophetic voice. We need to challenge inequalities, oppression, exploitation, and discover that this world is God's creation entrusted to us, and we need to be its responsible stewards. The fourth message, that we need to rediscover our universal human values, that we are reminded we are all children of a merciful God. We are one common human family, and the values, the virtues rather, of compassion, care, equity, justice, humility, humus. We need to be in touch with the Mother Earth. And I thought these virtues, these values we already have. These are our renewable resources. These values of compassion, care, mercy, justice. When we can renew these resources we already have them in our traditions. So in this context, I was asked, is our education really facilitating it? Our educational system. So we need to educate to these values, especially to empowerment. And I go to the fifth point, about the importance of action. Religions are challenged to link worship and service, to link contemplation to action. And very strongly we were told religions need to walk the talk, that we need to be transparent, that we need to lead by example, that we need to put into practice what we preach. And we had statistics, church owning as much 10% of the all investments. We have more than 50% of schools, but also other religions, energy production. And also the challenge was thrown, can Vatican City become the first carbon neutral state in the world? We accept, I hope we will make it a reality. The sixth point was about the signs of hope, and a number of them came. Resources we have to move forward. Examples of individuals and institutions, communities, green synagogues, churches, mosques, temples, and also young people came out very strongly. Young people are waking up and moving forward, civil society, NGOs, and that everything will begin with a small group, just as we brought down slavery, apartheid, the Berlin Wall. It's a small group of people that can start the revolution. And our greatest resource is that God is on our side. Earth is the Lord's. And the last point is what we are walking into today, partnership. The only way to move forward, because the SDGs are connected. We cannot have people's welfare if we don't take care of the planet. Same way with peace and prosperity. And all this is modeled on the web of life and the Trinity. And I conclude with the orchestra, with the concert we had, where they all played together. It shows that it's not monocultures we need. We need cultural, geographical, religious diversities, and these are our resources. And I conclude by saying that, it was repeated, we need a people's movement. We need to create a community, and we are faith communities. Let's really build communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Kuathadim, for your cogent and lucid words. As you said, we've heard the voice of the younger generation at this conference, loudly and clearly and urgently telling us, you old people need to get your act together, and soon, if you're going to leave a good world for us to inherit. So to amplify that voice and that message, I'm very glad to invite Petra Adumoskavaya. Petra.
Thank you, first of all, to give me a small word. As you heard my name, I will not say it again, but I'm representing here the International Catholic Conference of Guiding, the Girl Scouts who take care about the spiritual development within the World Guide movement. I think that I'm also representing a bit the young generation, as I'm probably one of the youngest, but I am also representing the young mothers, as I am mother of 2 kids, and I'm representing the educated woman, because I have a master's degree in energy safety and international politics, so this topic is my topic. And I hope I can represent also my children. Many times, when I have meeting with some important people, or I have to talk like this, I have a feeling that some people, politics, cardinals, they look at me like, who are you, young woman, to talk to me? And I'm thinking, okay, who am I to be here to talk to you, and why I am here? But as I came through the guide movement, the Girl Scouts, I was taught to take decision, to take the responsibility, not only for me, but also for the others who are within our movement, within our groups, and within our neighbors. So through games, we learned a lot of things, and I think this is the way for the future generation how we can fulfill the global development goals. So, but yeah, today is the International Women's Day. And for me, to being equal means to be complementary. I couldn't do all of this within the guiding if I wouldn't have the big man behind me, which is our chaplain Lucio Sembrano from the Interreligious Dialogue of here from Vatican. And also many times we work with the Scouts, because especially within the Europe, we have the mixed movement for guides and Scouts. So for example, Antoine Maxud from ICCS, he helps me to develop a lot, and also within these responsibilities. And also, one big man behind me is, of course, my husband, because he takes care about my children. Yesterday, he wrote me that the daughter was crying all the night, that he wants mama. But he had to wake up in the morning and go to the work, and he's a teacher. But as he went as well through the Scout movement, and he's a Scout, so he knows what I'm doing, and he knows the importance of the non-formal education. So for me, the power of woman is not to be really equal, as we call it, but to be complementary, because each one of us has his own role. I'm personally playing ice hockey as a hobby. You probably wouldn't say that. But I cannot go and build a house. But my man can do it. I can go and prepare a dinner for him. And we are complementary. On this way, we are equal. But really, to be equal means for me to be complementary and help to each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words, Petra. Very much appreciated and touched by them. Now it's my honor to introduce Bishop Paul Tiege. Bishop Tiege is the Secretary of the Pontifical Council for Culture. He's been involved as a lecturer in moral theology in the Mater Dei Institute of Education in Dublin and at Holy Cross College. In 2004, he was named Director of Communications of the Office of the Dublin Diocese, and in October 2017, Pope Francis nominated as Secretary of the Pontifical Council for Culture. That's just a small snapshot of Bishop Tiege's career and achievements. I'm happy to introduce him.
I think there's a PowerPoint on the way, I think, and sorry, yeah. Okay, first and foremost, Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to thank the organizers for having given me this opportunity to partake in a conference. As I sat here yesterday, I learned a lot. It was enlightening. It was also slightly intimidating. My expertise is not in the area of interreligious dialogue, nor is it in the area of the SDGs. However, one of the areas I have worked in extensively over the last while, both in the area of communications and now in culture, is with the question of dialogue. The council where I work, the Council for Culture, is itself a product of Vatican II, where a council was set up to promote the dialogue with non-believers. So dialogue with non-believers, dialogue with people with different beliefs and of different assumptions is at the heart of what our work is about. We try and promote an environment where people can exchange ideas, grow an appreciation of each other, and learn together. My boss there, Cardinal Ravasi, is specialist in words, and he always reminds us the richness of the concept of dialogue. Dialogue is the bringing together. It's the putting into encounter of different ways of understanding the world, different philosophies, different value systems. So it's the encounter. But he also says the word dia reminds us it's about going deeper. It's about getting to deeper roots, and about dialogue is about the facilitating of the type of deep conversations that we need. In the partnership for the development, for the promotion, and for the implementation of the SDGs, I think dialogue is going to be a key concept. People from different perspectives, from religious perspectives, from NGOs, from governments, from intergovernmental and trans-governmental organizations need to come together. And in that dialogue, we need to learn about each other. We need to grow in a capacity to recognize what each has to contribute, to grow an understanding of one another, to grow an appreciation of each other, and where necessary also to attempt a type of reconciliation. So my contribution in talking about this debate today is bringing from Catholic social teaching, which is of itself dialogical in nature and in its method. So while Catholic social teaching could have much to say about specific SDGs, my focus is on the impetus that is in the social teaching of the Church and that is shared by many religions to engage with our world. So the first dialogue, I think, is a dialogue that has to be ongoing between the Church and the world. I think yesterday we've clearly got over the idea that somehow the Church is not concerned with the world, the Church is somehow immune from the struggles of the world. We believe the Church has something to offer. We have a vision of a God who loves us, who saves us, who loves us unconditionally, a God who grounds the value and worth of every single human person. We have a vision of Jesus Christ who showed us a way of living in service of the other that is going to help human flourishing of the individual and of our societies. But the Church also receives from the world. We learn much from the world, from developments and progress that have been made in areas and in philosophies and in contributions that are not directly coming from our Church perspective. So we need that, what was called yesterday, that bi-directional learning. We think about a pilgrim church, a church that journeys with others, that can never be concerned simply with itself. A church that wants to highlight that the unity of the human family is not just an accident, but is part of God's design and plan. All of us are sons and daughters of one God. A church that wants to highlight that the world we share is the home for all of us. And that identify, I think, together the enemies of that unity of our family, the sense of sharing of a home. Particularly, I think we need to be attentive to inequality, because inequality is leading to material inequality, which has its own problems. But it's also leading to types of democratic inequality, where those with more means can shop for the jurisdictions where they pay taxes, for the jurisdictions where they will be regulated. There's a lack of a sense of one destiny for all people. When I say Catholic social teaching is dialogical by its nature, what it means is Catholic social teaching means the Church is always in dialogue with a world that's changing. So our reflection has to be a work in progress. It cannot be static. The complexity of the situation and the issues we have to look at, the interconnectedness of all the SDGs reminds us of a need for an interdisciplinarity. The Church has the need for the contribution of economists, for social scientists, for hard sciences, and for so many others who have specific learnings and wisdoms and instruction to bring to us. But there's a lot of wisdom that's found not just in academic disciplines, but in cultures. And Pope Francis highlights this very strongly, that cultures can be the living embodiment of particular wisdoms, ways of seeing the world that are important if we are to have a full and inclusive view. I just quote Pope Francis from Laudato Si, where he says, "I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. We need a conversation which includes everyone, since the challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect all of us." Dialogue is so important in the thought of Pope Francis that when in the Laudato Si he begins to talk about the actions, he names dialogues, the dialogue at the level of the international community, the dialogue for national and local policies, the dialogue to ensure transparency in decision-making, the dialogue between economics and politics, the dialogue between religion and science. Part of what I want to suggest is that all dialogue is at some level an act of faith. It's an act of faith in the possibility of people together discovering truths that help to guide them in their path of life. When we're looking for the implementation of sustainable goals, when we're looking for things that are truly sustainable, good intentions are not enough. We need information, we need categories, we need criteria. What I want to suggest is that the Christian view, and not just a Christian view, but a view of all people made in the image and likeness of God, gives us reason to hope that working together, reflecting on what it means to be human, what it is that enhances human life, what it is that makes life worthwhile, we can begin to discern ends and purposes that we can share. Often in a postmodern world, difficult to get consensus on the bigger picture. But maybe more particularly, we can all agree and understand what are the things that threaten human flourishing? What are the things that are most destructive to our capacity to live together? Over the last few days, we've heard about corruption, we've heard about trafficking, we've heard about the values that are going against what we're trying to achieve: greed, we're thinking competitiveness, aggressiveness. Maybe we can find a consensus together on what it is we need to exclude. That approach is, some of you, this is my moral theologian hat, is what we used to call the natural moral law theory. It's neither natural nor law. It's a theory, it's a method. It's a method of saying that human beings working together, reflecting on what it is to be human, can find agreements and aims that facilitate our cohabitation, that enable us to live with respect for our environment. I think we have to recognize that the particular use of natural law theory within our own tradition, within the Catholic tradition, has had its own limitations. Very often it's been uncritically linked to assumptions about Western culture. Part of that is a way of reasoning that's very essential, that is very philosophical, maybe missing out even on the richness of our own biblical traditions. It's also something, and we have to concede, that has very often been shaped by a dominant male thought. We need the input, the voice, the contribution, and give proper weight to the perspectives, the values, and the actions of women. As one friend of mine says to me recently, 8th of March is not just a day, as one friend said to me recently. Also, another interesting perspective, co-teaching a course in theology and marriage and sexuality with a friend of mine some years ago. And I thought we'd done very well. We got our point across. And she said to me, Paul, never believe that women's silence means agreement. Be careful. We also need, I think, an attentiveness about a generational element, that we need to hear the voices of the young. I think there's a particular dialogue we need to have with those who uphold human rights, particularly to look at the concept of a human right. A human right is to say that people, we don't give human rights to people. We don't make and pass human rights. We recognize that human rights are rooted in the intrinsic dignity, value, and worth of human people. Yes. We need to recover that sense of the dignity of the person, and there I think is the grounds for a rich debate. As one provocative American scholar once said, the concept of a human right is to some extent ineliminably religious. It's a belief in something more, in the value of the other that is not given by society, that is not conferred by any one person or group. Human potential, to have these conversations, we need to be attentive to a number of relationships that are important. One is the relationship of faith and reason. I think we're all at a point where we can see that a competition between faith and reason is bad for either. To exclude religion from the public debate is bad. To be fundamentalist and to exclude other voices is equally threatening and problematic. I think we need, and this is to regain the trust of that faith and reason debate, as people of faith, as members of faith-based organizations, we need to celebrate the achievements of science more. We need to recognize the extraordinary riches God has given to the world through human reasoning and through human reflection and through the achievements of people who have been committed to scientific methodology. I think only if we have a very positive beginning, starting point there, then can we earn the right, maybe, to raise questions about the danger of what Pope Francis calls a technocratic paradigm. Technocratic paradigm being that we look on the scientific method as being the only method to resolve human problems. With a risk, therefore, of a dualism. We're here acting on a world rather than seeing ourselves as connected to a world. With a risk sometimes of not being duly attentive to the fact that many scientific and technological solutions have a particular commercial bias. So but we can only raise these in a concept of a friendship that begins with a recognition of the proper, valid, and worthwhile contribution of science. Pope Francis highlights this particularly when he talks about cultural ecology, where he talks about we need to understand that something like land is not just a material, a raw material to use, but in many traditions, is something that has a spiritual value, and we need to respect particularly indigenous cultures, which have much to teach us about a more holistic relationship to our world. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to name this quickly. We need the arts. We need an education that sensitizes us to beauty, where beauty is an antidote to everything being valued in terms of its utility and its pragmatic worth. We need the arts who can help us to see things differently, who can help us to empathize and be compassionate to people from different perspectives. We also need, and I looked for the right word here, service. The mention of scouting here. We need to encourage organizations, groups, and traditions who invite people into concrete service. Much of what we learn about service is actually in doing rather than in a theoretical exploration. So we need the organizations and the groups who help us to learn the lesson that it is in service of others that we find ourselves and our own value. A digital world, one thing I just want to say here is that we need to go beyond the idea that somehow technology is going to do the communication for us. Good communication is always a human rather than a technical achievement. We need to build a network of people, not just of optic fibers. We need a network of people. We need to be attentive of a world which is increasingly polarized. We need as religious leaders to try and sensitize people to not going only for information that already compounds their existing worldview. Something was said yesterday about the importance of education. I think education has a particular role in helping people to be discerning consumers and users of the extraordinary amount of information that is now close at hand. We need to learn more intentional communication, where we're focused on what the other person is saying, where we're taking time to reflect so that we learn the values of good communications. I think the humanities have much to help us there, and I think a visual literacy. Finally, I just leave good dialogue is always a commitment. I took this image because it's one where Pope Francis met people who were coming to Lesbos at a time when our media were talking about swarms, hordes, Europe being run over, the possibility of invasion. He gave a face and a visibility to people who were somehow been seen only as a threat or as a danger. We have to begin in our dialogue to see the other as like us, as sharing our nature, that we have to give strength to the value of love and hope, rather than the kind of a policy that's based on distance, to see the other as threat, as to be feared, and therefore the power of love. And so as religious traditions, I'm running short here, but final thing I think is we need to create a constituency for leaders who lead us to our more noble instincts, who lead us to trust others, to grow in communion together, and to risk in learning and sharing, that as the diversity of our world be seen as a richness rather than something that threatens our own positions. Thank you.
I'd like to warmly thank Bishop Teague for that very passionate and inspiring address. Thank you very much. I see there's some people standing at the back, and there are plenty of seats here and here and here. So if people standing want to come forward and take a seat, you're warmly invited to do so. So our next speaker really embodies in her person this ideal of partnership between different sectors and stakeholders that we're talking about. Dr. Maria Flachbach is Parliamentary Secretary to the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. She is an expert in veterinary medicine, where she has her PhD, also lectured in animal anatomy. She was member of the Central Committee of the German Catholics and president of the German Catholic Women's Association. She's been a member of the Bundestag, the German Parliament, since 2002. And so she brings together in a wonderful way science and academia and environmental awareness and a religious faith to influence public policy of a large country. So it's a great honor to introduce Dr. Maria Flachbach. Thank you.
Thank you for this very, very nice introduction, Your Eminencies, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Here both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Pope Francis asked us to do this in his encyclical Laudato Si. And Agenda 2030 also asked us to do this in a secular way with its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In today's globalized world, that cry is too loud to be ignored. The world is more interlinked than ever. Goods, services, information, and people are moving around the globe. The refugee situation has shown once again that the fates of everybody in the world are linked. Our future depends on the future of people in other parts of the world, and their future depends on us. The care for our common home, as Pope Francis called it, is important for all of us, as we all know. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. This conference looks at 3 topics that are important for German development cooperation, and they are the ending world poverty and stopping our planet Earth from being exploded, bringing justice to globalization as described in the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, and looking at how religion can help to create a more just world. We face great challenges. 821 million people are suffering from hunger. 1 in 10 children across the world have to work. A person living in an industrialized country uses 3 or 4 times as many resources as somebody living in Africa or Asia. But it is people in poor countries who suffer first from the impact of climate change, tropical storms, and the rise of the sea level. Those of us who live in Europe, in the richer countries, are living at the expense of people in other parts of the world, and we are living at the expense of the planet. If everybody lived as we do, we would need the resources of 2 or 3 planets, but we only have 1, as we know. We need to bring justice to globalization. That means, above all, sharing out opportunities in a just way. That means access to food, to resources, to knowledge, and to the right to make one's voice heard. The Agenda 2030 and the 17 SDGs are a pact on the world's future. They show us the path we need to take towards justice and globalization. Sustainability is a principle that must guide everything we do in politics, in business, and society. That is what the 2030 Agenda demands. In order to achieve this sustainable world, we need people or groups of people who communicate the right values, who can have a positive impact on how people think and act. The kind of people who are now called influencers. I'm thinking here above of our religion and faith community as influencers, preserving creation and caring for society's outcasts, for the poor. Those are the values that can be found in all the major world religions. And religion is both a source of ethics, of enough, and an understanding of development that is not only about economic or technological progress. Germany is neutral in terms of belief, but not in terms of values. We do not follow Christian policies, but our policies are based on a Christian view of humanity and on the principle of Christian responsibility. Our aim is sustainable development on the basis of shared values: responsibility, sustainability, moderation, and peace. That is why we want to enter into partnership worldwide with the religious communities and religious leaders. In many of the countries we work with, the religions and religious leaders play an important role. 4 out of 5 people in our partner countries say that religion plays an important role in their lives. In Nigeria, for example, 90% of people go to church every Sunday or to mosque every Friday. In Germany, however, it is only around 6%. Often the churches in development countries are the only agencies left on the ground when cooperation with the government has become impossible, during crisis, for example, or when countries are unstable. In many places, they are also the ones who prepare the ground for de-escalation, for dialogue and peace processes. In our official development cooperation, we want to build on that. We want to build on those many years of experience, on the trust these organizations have on established networks. The German Development Ministry wants to expand its cooperation with faith-based organizations. For over 50 years, we have been working together closely with the two major Christian churches in Germany. Now we want to find more new partners. The principles of our cooperation are that it is based on values that are, as far as possible, shared by all world religions, and it also takes account of their differences. The kind of value-based development policy we are pursuing takes the individual seriously. And so it must also take his or her view of the world seriously. For most people in the world, that view is very much influenced by religion. We work together wherever we can achieve more together or prevent worse from happening. We, as a German government, also have clear limits. For example, when religious leaders speak out in favor of discrimination or violence. Some basic values are non-negotiable, like human rights. At the same time, we have to talk to those who are seen as critical of Western values because we believe dialogue is not dangerous. The refusal of engage in dialogue is dangerous. In Egypt, for example, we are supporting a forum for intercultural dialogue. It brings together Christian and Muslim leaders and also those working in culture and the media. The forum offers a safe space for discussion when politically sensitive topics affecting the country's future can also be addressed. For example, questions about the development of the state, religion, and democracy in Egypt, or gender equality and social justice. We have formalized our cooperation with the religious communities through the establishment of the International Partnership on Religion and Sustainable Development, PART. It is a network of 100 government, civil society, and religious organizations. Its aim is to engage the knowledge and involvement of different faith-based organizations in the spirit of the 2030 Agenda. The partnership profits from a diverse membership and from the capacities in social capital of the faith involved. The aims include improving the health of mothers and children and improving sexual and reproductive health and rights. 25 years ago, at the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, these rights were first recognized as human rights. Great challenges remain, especially in development countries. And not only at the International Women's Days, religion plays an especially important role with regard to women's rights and their position in society. Women still suffer discrimination. They are not given access to education of the same quality and too often have no chance to determine their own future. Often, this is justified with arguments that come, so it is claimed, from a religious background. But our development cooperation is unlikely to be successful unless women are involved as equal partners. Women play an important role in bringing up and educating children, in the health and nutrition of the whole family. They are important as agricultural workers and entrepreneurs. It has been shown that peace negotiations are more successful and the peace is more lasting when women are involved. The challenges of rapid population growth can only be successfully tackled with women, self-confident empowered women are involved. In developing countries, at least 21 million teenage girls a year become pregnant without wanting to. Often this means they lose the chance of education or vocational training. Maternal mortality is also unacceptably high because women do not have the sufficient medical support when they are pregnant or giving birth. I want, at the very least for us, to mention crimes against women's and girls' sexual self-determination and physical integrity. We are talking here about dignity for millions of women and girls. We cannot overstate the influence of religions and religious leaders in this context. That is why, as a deputy minister in the German government, and above all, as a practicing Catholic and chair of a large Catholic women's association in Germany, I'm calling on you for your support. Conferences like this offer an important platform where we can enter into a conversation and bring together all our efforts to achieve a more peaceful and just world with all of you, civil society, UN, governments, religious leaders, and FBOs. In our thoughts and our deeds, let us take inspiration from words that the attribute to Saint Francis of Assisi. Start by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flaxberg, for that important message. I particularly value what you said about the unique role that women have in bringing peace bringing about peace and dialogue. I think that's a crucial message for us all. So in a moment, opening it to questions. But if I may, I'd like to take my chairman's prerogative to talk very briefly about a couple of concrete examples of partnership which I've had the privilege to be involved in. I'm a rabbi. I live in Jerusalem in Israel, the Holy Land. And I was involved in interfaith sustainability, but at a certain point, I wanted to be involved in doing as well as talking as important as it is. So I moved to work in the field of solar energy. And I worked with religiously inspired solar energy pioneers in Israel, bringing together science, engineering, business, and faith. One of my teachers was a great pioneer of solar energy worldwide named Arnold Goldman, who was also a scholar of Jewish mysticism, of Kabbalah. And he brought together in the most beautiful way mystical teaching and the engineering of solar technology. Just one brief example. In Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, our goal as human beings is to be receptacles, vessels, which can receive the immense, endless, infinite divine light which God is pouring into the world. So Mr. Goldman said, this is our challenge for energy too. And what we're trying to do in creating solar energy is create vessels of silicon, of glass, which can receive just a tiny fraction of the infinite divine blessing which God is pouring into the world every moment, 1 hour of which could power the world for a year if we only knew how to receive it. And it's a beautiful synthesis which of the methods of religion, the vision of religion and the tradition, and the power of technology to transform our world. The other example of partnership I'd like to give is I was privileged to work for an Israeli company called Gigawatt Global, which created one of the first large-scale solar energy projects in Africa. We did it in Rwanda, a terribly poor country. And there, we, a for-profit organization, although motivated by religious values, partnered with a non-profit organization, the Agahozo Shalom Youth Village, a wonderful village for orphans of the genocide in Rwanda. In Rwanda, there are tragically many, many orphans. And so we worked together with the youth village. They provided the land. We built the solar project. It produces 8% of Rwanda's electricity. And the village receives some of the revenue stream to support the health and the education of the orphans. So those are a couple of examples which I've had of innovative ways of bringing together science, technology, religion, business, and NGOs to do things which none of those agents could have accomplished on their own. So now I'd like to invite questions and contributions from the floor. A question is a grammatical form which invites information or understanding from the other. It implies an openness to hear something which one does not already know. It's usually marked with a question mark at the end, and in oral communication, it typically has a raised intonation at the end. That's so. Just in case anybody wasn't clear about that, that's a question. So any questions and contributions? I'll take 3 at a time, moving from this area to that way. Any questions and contributions? Yes, first the gentleman at the back in the white shirt with raising his hand. Yes, you. Yes, pointing to his head. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Oliver Putz from the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, Germany. My question is actually for Dr. Fluxbad. Thank you very much. Really excellent points you raised. My question is this. You mentioned that religions should be influencers, and while I'm with you that time is running out, we should influence, makes me a little nervous. Could we not say, perhaps better, that our values, shared values in the religions, should help shape the negotiations of what we are to do next, rather than say we influence? Thank you.
Yes, I'll take 3 at a time and then answer. Yes, yes, the lady in the middle here.
Hodge for Million Peacemakers. My question is partnerships. You mentioned NGOs, the religious institutions. What about businesses? What role would have businesses and religious institutions to actually uphold the values that are so important that businesses have to uphold, like human rights, respect, and others? What are your opinions about that, please?
Thank you. And one from this section of the audience, please. Yes, yes, the lady over there. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup. Je m'appelle Cyril Fray. Je travaille en France en association de protection de la nature. J'entends beaucoup parler d'actions et de partenariats entre les grandes organisations et ceux qui travaillent sur le terrain. C'est mon travail de tous les jours, ce travail de terrain. Et nous constatons, en Europe, notamment en France, une méfiance de plus en plus importante des décideurs envers les acteurs associatifs, notamment les ONG, qui sont accusés d'être politisés, d'être des entraves au développement, méfiance aussi vis-à-vis des religions. Dans ces conditions, nous travailler ensemble, on ne demande que ça, mais ce sont ceux-mêmes qui sont chargés de financer, de porter les projets, qui nous rejettent. Alors comment faire? Comment montrer que nous ne sommes pas des ennemis de l'humanité, ce qu'on nous dit parfois tel quel?
French is not mine. I'm sorry.
I'm afraid I didn't either. Okay.
Okay.
So, would any of our panelists like to respond to those 3 questions? One was addressed to you in specifically, Dr. Flaxbart. Yes. You would like to start with that?
That was the question, whether it might be better just to say we share common values than we depend on influences. It was not the question.
The negotiations of what we are to do next, rather than influence. we need to work together rather than to know what the rest of us has to do. That's the question.
Yes, we have, sure, we have to work together, and we have to share our values, and we have to do the negotiations together, just to come to a point, to come to our goals. Otherwise we won't have any chance. I don't know whether I have got it correctly. I would suppose we can have a short dialogue and after the session. So, and the next point was the question about the influence of business. Of course, business is one of our very, very important actors. We have had this compact with Africa, you might remember, in the G7 meeting in Hamburg in 2017, I suppose. And this was about the question how the conditions for business might be made a little bit more smooth to invest in our partner countries, just to create their jobs and vocational education and all these things. But on the other hand, we also have to think about the ethic master plan, about the ethic conditions they have to fulfill, or they have to fit in. So business is one of our very, very strong and very, very important co-actor in this work.
So any other of our panelists would like to respond to those questions?
Just on the notion of business, one thing I think is important is that I think we all have to recognize contributions coming from the world of business, from people who perhaps, not necessarily, I think it's a separation, because very often people work from the world of business are also motivated by faith. So there's already within that person a meeting and of competencies, their competencies of people of faith, their awareness of people of skills, of people of business. Just one thing I think that Pope Francis would invite us is, very often there was the old critique that says the business of business is to make money, and it's about profit and loss, and a critique of anything that's somehow seen as not being part of its responsibility to shareholders. I think how we think about profit and loss, particularly about the costs of certain activities performed by business that are not necessarily absorbed by the businesses themselves, but fall to be paid by wider communities. And we need a more integral understanding of profit and loss that then I think would incentivize more enlightened forms of engagement.
If I could just very, very briefly address that issue of business. But yes, business is an essential actor. I mean, many of the things that have to happen can only be accomplished by business. For example, in the area I'm familiar with, renewable energy in Africa, transforming Africa to renewable energy would take trillions of dollars of investment. And there simply is not enough non-profit charitable money in the world to accomplish that. It can only be done by business. And business is made up of human beings. There are some people who are motivated by faith and some people who are motivated by greed. And that's where the work of NGOs becomes tremendously important in lobbying businesses and holding them to account and ensuring that they act on the highest standards which we'd like to hold them to. Yes, they have a vital role, but we have a vital role as people, consumers and citizens in holding them to account and making sure they do their job morally.
Das ist der Unterschied, den wir machen in Deutschland zwischen Gewächshaus und Entwicklungshilfe zur Entwicklungszusammenarbeit.
Frau Flaxbart is commenting, that's the differentiation that we make in Germany at the moment. We're moving away from development aid and towards development cooperation.
Wir haben gesehen, dass die Entwicklungshilfeprojekte, die wir machen, nach 3 oder 5 Jahren häufig keinen Effekt hinterlassen, keine Strukturen, die langfristig, auf die man langfristig aufbauen kann.
What we had seen was that the development aid projects that had been done in the past and that lasted for 4 or 5 years had no lasting effect, left no long-term structures on which it was then possible to build.
Und deshalb sind wir zuversichtlich, dass wenn zukunftsfähig sind.
And so that is why we're confident that when private investors come in, who create jobs, who produce products that are suitable for the market, of course they have their own interest in that, and that's what makes these things sustainable for the future.
Und dann ist es selbstverständlich wichtig, dass sie moralischen Grundsätzen gehorchen, über die wir uns hier in diesem Raum sehr, sehr schnell einig sind und auf die wir dann achten müssen.
And naturally, one thing is very important, that there are certain moral principles that must be adhered to, moral principles on which we here in this room could very quickly come to an agreement on, and that we too must also adhere to those moral principles.
Thank you. And Bishop Tige.
Just there was a question there about the lack of trust that can emerge between different actors and the partnerships that are necessary for the delivery of the SDGs. I think dialogue is particularly important in contexts where there may be a lack of trust. In dialogue, by focusing on what we share, that we're trying to be in service of the same aims, the same goals, we explore together first what unites us, and as that confidence grows in us, maybe the goodwill and the appreciation of the other person's position emerges, that can also create an environment where we can then move to talk about where we have differences, where we have disagreements, where there are misunderstandings, and where we name the lack of trust, but do it in a spirit of cooperation with a commitment to overcoming that lack of trust. But being honest with each other about difference, recognizing the lack of trust, but incrementally growing in a friendship that enables us to be more direct and more honest with each other.
Thank you. Let me take some more questions. The gentleman in the front here.
Me van a disculpar que hable en castellano, pero estoy muy contento, muy feliz de participar de esta conferencia internacional interreligiosa, pero que a mí me entusiasma escuchar la cooperación internacional, el ponernos de acuerdo, pero no olvidemos que el Papa Francisco en la Laudato Si habla de este sistema tecnocrático, este sistema que mata, este sistema que excluye. Si no abordamos entre las religiones, que me parece muy importante este esfuerzo que estamos haciendo del diálogo interreligioso, si no abordamos este proyecto nuevo que sea sostenible y que sea solidario, buscar un nuevo modelo de desarrollo humano integral. Si no nos ponemos en este camino, todo esto que estamos hablando es muy bonito, nos entusiasma, pero chocamos con una triste realidad que el dinero es el que manda y no la persona humana creada por Dios.
Thank you. And the gentleman in the middle here has been waiting. Thank you. Oops.
Somebody gave me extraordinary desperation.
Okay.
In various places, including the Holy See, and I'm working at Princeton on global issues and religion at the moment. I'd like to come back to what I think was the first question about negotiations and the framework within which we address these questions. As it happens with a group of colleagues, including practitioners, I've prepared a report for the OSCE, which was launched in January, on the question of the framework within which we address global challenges. And the kind of issues that arise would be the timescale we're working within, the regional scope of the negotiations, and the agenda. Because under Goal 16, for example, of the SDGs, we have many political questions, issues of conflict, and so on, as well as the traditional developmental issues. So I just want to underline, perhaps turning it into a question, the importance of getting the frameworks right. In addition to creating movements at grassroots level, we need better international frameworks for negotiation. And I would make one other point, if I might, about the arts and creativity. I would like to mention, since it's International Women's Day, the Muses. It seems to me that the most important thing about art and creativity is the sense that it's given. And Seamus Heaney, our Nobel Prize-winning poet, identifies the read across from artistic inspiration to the givenness of political change, the cloudburst, the tidal wave of justice. So in fact, art is a form of prayer in the public space. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, poets as the unacknowledged legislators of society, as Shelley said, who spent some time in Rome. Yes, I'll take a couple more. There, a woman, yes, you. Yes.
Oh, you see, I wasn't aware how this is how it works. Good morning. My name is Amanda. My question is, for any meaningful partnership to be successful within the SDGs, it means that we have to address the elephants in the conversation, namely the issue of the three issues of power, wealth, and past wrongs. So, for example, if you're looking at climate change, we know that the carbon budget has been almost all of it used because the West has been able to develop itself. I could give other examples in terms of the economics and gender and so on. My question is, what is the role of religions in bringing justice and love to a conversation about meaningful partnerships?
Thank you. And perhaps I'll take one or two more as well at this stage. The gentleman in the front here.
Thank you very much. I had the honor and the privilege to meet Kiera Lubeck more than 20 years ago here in Rome. I was deeply impressed by her spiritual, she was a spiritual genius. Ever since I have been wondering, and on Women's Day, I would like to raise this question. When will we ever have a women pope? When will we yes. When will we have ever a woman Dalai Lama? And so on and so forth. Because we in the world of religion do not give that decision-making authority to women. And how long is that going to happen? So this is the time for us to feel challenged and to do the right thing. Thank you.
Now that's what I call a question. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'll leave my words. One gentleman at the back waving urgently, so let me take your question. Right at the back there, yes.
Buenas. Muy buen día, yo soy Orlando de la HOC Internacional. Hemos sido invitados aquí y veo que hay muchas personas que están levantando la mano y entiendo que el encuentro tiene esa naturaleza, pues, ¿no? De un encuentro de promover el diálogo entre las diferentes religiones. Entonces creo que es importante tener la oportunidad de hacer algunas preguntas. Digo porque desde acá es un poco difícil no hablar, ¿no? Porque uno tiene poca posibilidad de expresarse. Quisiera primero felicitar a la compañera de Scout que ha presentado algunos elementos a partir de testimonios reales de su experiencia y vivencia concreta. Sin embargo, si pudieras, por favor, colocar más elementos, si en el Scout hoy tienen una mirada de cuáles son los problemas reales que hoy afronta la juventud en el mundo. esa es una pregunta para usted, si por favor puedes compartir algunos elementos. Una segunda pregunta para el obispo.
I'm sorry, can I limit you to one question because we're running out of time, so I'd like to hear what our
qué
panelists
pena.
have to answer. Yes. So, we have shaping frameworks for dialogue, past wrongs, wealth and power, and when will we ever have a woman pope? Or so, who would like to take those? Yes, Petra. Would you like?
So, I would like to say a few things to the debate. First of all, from my
Can
point...
you limit it to one or two things? Because
yeah, I will try. First of all, I would like to point out that, of course, on this place we talk about the interreligious dialogue, but what we see in the scouting and guiding now today, it's not the problem to meet and talk with the different religions. The problem is probably to find the common values with those who are saying that they don't have any faith. The other aspect I wanted to say, you was mentioning the international frameworks. I think there is, to achieve the global development goals, there is no need to create new frameworks, because we have already a lot of organizations, governmental, not governmental, where can be implemented the education for the global development goals and the concrete actions. We just have to use them. We have to use the politics to implement the global development goals into the laws, and we have to use the youth organizations to educate the young people about the global development goals as well. Like this, we can achieve the goal much more better if you go from down, probably not directly from the schools, because what the kids take from the schools is different what they take from their hobbies. And the question about the girl guiding or boy scouting and implementing the global development goals, or empowering them, teach them, we have shared values, we have the law, we have the promise, which is everywhere in the world the same. But the advantage of our movement is that it has different programs in different parts of the world. We are divided into the regions, and for example, if you are interested to know more, and if you type WAGGS, WAGGGS, there are 3G, the World Associations of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, or WOSM, WOSM, and you can look on the websites and you can see the concrete programs which they do in different regions. In Africa, it is a lot about the empowering girls to take actions, about the education, about the woman, for example, together with the WAGGS, together with DAF, sorry. They have a big programs to educate the young woman about the pregnancy, about the period, about the education on different topics. And many scouts all around the world, they do the service in different countries. But the basic things, when they are children, they are learned through the games. So then they come home and they teach their parents what they learned. And this is the power.
Thank you very much. Responding.
Exzellenz, ich würde Ihre Frage sehr, sehr gerne aufnehmen.
I'd like to answer your question about the economy.
Selbstverständlich kenne ich das Wort von Papst Franziskus, der sagt, diese Wirtschaft tötet.
Of course, I know the words of Pope Francis, who has said that this kind of economy is killing people.
Und ich kenne genügend Beispiele weltweit, wo Wirtschaft tötet.
And I know plenty of examples worldwide where the economic practices are killing people.
Ich denke insbesondere an schlimme Beispiele von Kinderarbeit.
I'm thinking in particular of the terrible examples of child labor.
Das ist zum Beispiel der Grund dafür, dass es jetzt in Deutschland eine Initiative gibt, zu überprüfen, ob in Produkten, die wir bei uns kaufen können, Kinderarbeit verwendet worden ist.
That is why in Germany we have launched an initiative through which we can examine products that we are buying in Germany to see whether they have been produced using child labor.
Und wir werden diese Frage auch in unserer EU-Ratspräsidentschaft 2020 aufnehmen.
And it's also a question that we will be taking on board during our EU presidency in 2020.
Nichtsdestotrotz haben wir in Deutschland ein Wirtschaftssystem, was eben nicht Kapitalismus ist, sondern soziale Marktwirtschaft.
Nevertheless, the economic system that we practice in Germany is not capitalism, it's social market economy.
Und das bedeutet, dass Unternehmer selbstverständlich eine Verantwortung haben für ihre Arbeitnehmerinnen und Arbeitnehmer.
And that means that businesses, of course, have a responsibility for those who work for them.
Und das heißt, dass es Sozialpartnerschaften gibt zwischen Unternehmerverbänden und Gewerkschaften.
And that means that there are social partnerships between business associations and trade unions.
Und das bedeutet, dass Unternehmer Verantwortung haben für die Ausbildung ihrer Arbeitnehmer.
And that also means that businesses have a responsibility for training their workers.
Und diese Wirtschaft habe ich vor Augen, wenn ich darüber spreche, dass Wirtschaft ein wichtiger Akteur ist, selbstverständlich auch in der Entwicklungszusammenarbeit.
And that is the kind of economy, that is the kind of business model that I am thinking of when I say that business can be an important player in development cooperation.
And Sir, the question of the first Pope. In my women's association in Germany, im katholischen Deutschen Frauenbund, we are working and praying for more equality in society and in the Roman Catholic Church. So wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay, let's see if any of the other panelists have something to say first, and then we'll, yes. And
Just the question, two questions I'd like to take. One is the question about how do we bring the notions of love and justice into our discussions. I think there was after Vatican II, there was a big debate in the church about what is it that makes Christian or Catholic morality different, the specificity of Catholic morality. And one of the things that became very clear was that good morality is good morality. There are certain basic human values that we all share. And therefore, that I think allows us to engage and to use a language that people will be able to meet with. Where the specificity or the difference comes sometimes is in the motivation, the intentionality we have. And that's important. It doesn't necessarily change our concrete behavior, but it does give us a deeper reason to be moral, to be attached to certain human values. In the world we live in particularly, as well as the structural changes, there's going to be a need for a lot of individual conversion, where people themselves are going to have to resist the patterns of consumerism and individualism that are so dominant in our society. I think that's where religion can help people to find a deeper motivation, a story that makes sense of a different way of living. Catholics and Christians and believers have no monopoly on self-sacrifice, but we do have a story and a context and a bigger picture that makes sense of choices for the other rather than for oneself. Finally, on that question that I better not duck completely, I think on one of my own perspectives on, I grew up in a church, and the church I knew and the faith I inherited was very much given to me by women educators within my own family. So one thing that we do recognize that there is, I think, a relative parity when it comes to delivery and to service. Where the problem begins to emerge more particularly is in the area of decision-making, discernment, and governance. And one of the problems we have is that across the board in our church, discernment, decision, and governance is overly related to the role of the ordained minister. So before issuing about the question about ordination or non-ordination, I think the first thing we have to begin to do is to look at a concept of church, and church as decision-making, as deliberative, that is truly inclusive to the insights of men and women, lay and ordained, rather than being simply a club or somehow the professional elite or the officer corps who will do all the decision-making. I think that we need to get right. In that context, then, I think that will liberate us for a more free discussion about the ordination and non-ordination of women, where that is de-linked from that being the only way of access to power and decision-making.
Thank you. Petra, so would you like to have a last word? No, are you sure? Okay, yes. Do you want to make your announcement, and I'll say yes.
Okay, I'm sure all of us are excited about going and meeting Pope Francis. As a technical announcement, now we go down for a well-deserved cup of coffee or tea, whatever. And at 11 o'clock, at 11, we meet at the entrance. That's, yesterday where we collected the tax, but outside. And from there, together, we will move to Sala Clementina. There will be ushers, people guiding us. So just don't worry. Once we assemble, we will be instructed and taken to Sala Clementina. The most important thing is, on arriving at the Sala Clementina, there is a protocol to be followed regarding the seating. So the first rows are reserved. You'll find name tags there for religious leaders, beginning with the cardinals, bishops, other religious leaders, other public and civil authorities, speakers, sponsors, and the rest of us. So please keep this in mind. Thank you.
So, just by way of concluding this very productive session, I'd like to first thank my wife, both because it's Women's Day, second because she's allowed me to come by looking after the children, but third because she is a participant in the first ever program to train Orthodox women rabbis in Israel. She is a pioneer and a trailblazer. Thank you. And so she won't be Pope one day, but I do believe that this process of bringing women's voices into decision making is nothing less than a process of divine revelation in our day of the other hidden, forgotten side of the human in relation to godliness. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge and to thank a partner and a stakeholder in this enterprise who we should never forget, and that is God. And I really believe that if God does not bless our work, then there is little chance of success. And that we we must all do our best, but ultimately, I pray that God will bless all of us, that his blessing and his presence will rest on all of the work of our hands, and so it will be blessed with success to do what we need to so that his world can be a place where he truly feels that he can live and dwell. God willing, this should be the outcome of our efforts going forward. Thank you very much for our wonderful, wonderful panelists. And now our coffee.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for